So from here on in, pretty much the Russian positions is the entire fucking forest. There's 5 square K of Russian positions, okay? There was anti-tank mines on the tracks, there was anti-personnel mines on the tracks, there's band and fragmentation mines, okay? It's a lot of deer move through here. There is a lot of stuff still lay around here. Please don't touch anything. That doesn't just go for like anything that looks like ammunition, clothing, anything like that, okay? Like there was a lot of booby traps around here. I've been through most areas in this forest, but there's still little pockets of areas where, because it's so big and it wasn't boxed off properly when it was cleared, there's still going to be little places, okay? Yeah, and that's about it really. So
my name's Christopher Garrett. I'm a British national from the Isle of Man. I've been volunteering on and off in Ukraine since 2014. When I left school, I joined the British Army in 2000, but I ended up having a knee injury and I came out within the first year of being in. So when I left the armed forces, I just went back to civilian life. I never did any bomb disposal or anything in the armed forces. But in the late 2000s, I became involved with the Karen National Liberation Army and the Karen National Defense Organization in Myanmar, which is where I first became aware of the serious problems with landmines. And then when I came to Ukraine in 2014, I immersed myself more into the mine clearance side of everything here. All of this was munitions, all of it. The entire floor all around here was covered in every type of munition you can absolutely imagine. In Myanmar, the mine risk is very, very high, but it's mostly anti-personnel mines. They deal with some anti-tank mines, but it's very few because you're mostly working in primary jungle. The mine situation in Ukraine is incredibly different. Because Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, it was stockpiled by the Soviet Union for a potential war with NATO. And there was millions and millions of anti-personnel mines, anti-tank mines, and submunitions and cluster munitions stored in this country. So when the fighting broke out in 2014 in Donetsk and Luhansk, a lot of these mines started being placed in the ground by pro-Russian forces. And the situation that we have here now, it makes Southeast Asia look like an easy weekend. The situation here is very, very different. Anything and everything you can imagine was here, including blank ammunition, which means they didn't even have time to change and empty their vehicles out before they went from training in Belarus to crossing the border here. So when I came here in 2014 initially, I'd just come back from Myanmar from doing 6 months mine clearance on a project around a couple of villages there. And then when I got back to the UK, I realised that the protests in Maidan had obviously turned into conflict at that point. Crimea had been taken. And I'd been talking to some Ukrainians on social media anyway. And when I reached out to them again, they asked if I could come out and offer any support with mine risk education or basic firearms training, basic medical training for any of the soldiers going to the front line. Ukraine had not been at war in its existence really. So when the war broke out, they had a lot of people that didn't have much training at all. So I looked around to try to find a way to support. I reached out to the Army, the National Guard, the police, the state emergency services. But at the time, the situation was very different back then. So I couldn't really find a way to properly support. So I looked into a couple of other options, a couple of the volunteer battalions, and I eventually joined on with Azov, which was becoming part of the National Guard at that point. So I then joined on with Azov. Azov was then amalgamated into the Ukrainian National Guard as a battalion, and then further on as a regiment. And I stayed with them between 2014 till the end of 2018. Do you know what a flechette round is? So a flechette round, it's either, you'll either get it as a tank round or you'll get it as like an artillery round. So instead of having shrapnel, it has hundreds of thousands of little darts in it. Okay, so it gets fired, it opens up in midair with a bursting charge, and then you get thousands of these darts come out. Okay, really, really horrible things. But if you look at the side of the trees here, if you come to this one, because obviously there was flechette rounds in the trucks, all the trees are full of it. So like here it's not too bad because we know that there was no PFM used, but in the forest in Crimea, like one of those little darts gives off roughly the same signal as a PFM1 mine. So it's an absolute nightmare just trying to search for them. So up until the night before the invasion, we weren't sure if it would actually happen. It wasn't the first time where Russia had moved a lot of troops to the front line to the border of Ukraine. But then when I went to sleep the night before, I kind of knew, you know, I could kind of sense that I was either going to wake up and it would just be nothing, or I was going to wake up and it would be complete chaos. And sadly, I woke up to the video footage that was being released. By the time I'd woken up, I think the invasion had been going on for about 2 hours. But yeah, I mean, the strangest thing when we came through here was the fact that we didn't find a single body. We found a couple of areas that looked like graves, so obviously they got investigated, but we didn't find anything. Which did come across as quite strange. You would expect, especially with the level of destruction that happened here, you would have expected to have found something, so we can only suspect that the Russians actually took their bodies with them or they buried them somewhere. The forest in Crimea, you would find bits of bodies. Outside of Bucha and Irpin when we were clearing, had a couple of instances when we found body parts. I accidentally found someone's foot on the ball of the heel on my mine probe while I was probing around a BTR. That was pleasant. The worst thing is going to be, like, if the war stopped right now, or if Ukraine was to say maybe make a push forward in an area like Bakhmut or Avdiivka or somewhere like this, because in those areas now, because the fighting has been so intense in very specific, like very small areas for so long, the bodies now are laying in the tens of thousands, and it's not going to be a nice job, because when you're clearing that ground, you're going to be clearing through dead bodies, you're going to be, you know, and everything has to be handled very carefully. You know, you can't, even if the ground was flat, would you want to run a demining machine over it? Because then obviously you're running a machine over the remains as well, you know, so it's gonna be horrible. So I've always used very limited equipment. It's just basic hand tools and a landmine detector. And I kind of had those tools from day one, really, when I first came into Ukraine in 2014. But we also had very little support back then as well. There was very little support coming from the international community, or, you know, whether that be from international, like obviously foreign governments, but also people on social media and things like this. And I got by throughout those years with a very small amount of equipment. When we fast-tracked to 2022, after the full-scale invasion, there was a lot of equipment and support started to coming in. There was a lot more support initially from financial donations, so that we were able to buy equipment. But it's interesting because, like, Western militaries don't fight like this. But if you put a Western military in here right now, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to put their bashers up. Well, they're going to die because they're above ground. You know, and okay, they might dig a fighting hole or a foxhole. You won't see Western militaries dig in positions like this. And most of the Western munition boxes, they're all metal. They're not wood. All the wood gives them, they have their building materials. They have nuts and bolts and screws. They have handles. They have firewood. You know, we can say what we want about the Soviet tactics and everything else, but when you piece it all together, knowing that they don't abide by what we would class as normal rules of war, they make do very well. They go and steal what they need. We need an excavator, we go and steal it. We need plastic sheeting to go over our trenches, we go and steal it, you know, and that's how they're able to kind of still work and survive when there was no resupply coming out here. The work has got so much harder. We have so many landmines in the ground now, you know. I think a conservative estimate would probably be somewhere in the region of 8 to 10 million landmines mixed between hand-emplaced anti-personnel and anti-tank, and then on top of that with submunitions and what we call scat mines. So mines that are fired by rocket artillery or dropped by helicopter. But there's so many mines here now. People are trying to come up with new technology to be able to find the mines and to be able to deal with the mines. Some of this technology I think will be very good in the future, but right now it's not really making a difference because we still have active fighting going on, and just the state of the ground conditions. We have a lot of people talk to us and say we need to create a lot more demining machines. And yes, for certain areas, for open farmers' fields and stuff, this will speed up the process. But as you can see behind me here, you can't run a demining machine across this, you know, it's impossible to do it. The landmines have caused problems for both sides, obviously for Ukraine and Russia. So if we imagine both sides have laid defensive minefields and offensive minefields to protect their positions and ingress routes. But effectively what's happened now is both sides have kind of blocked themselves in with landmines. And a lot of the people that maybe laid these mines in 2022 have been injured, or they've been killed, or they've been moved to a different sector. So no one has a clear understanding where these mines are. It's not like World War II where you would have very specific belts of landmines that are clearly marked and they know exactly how many numbers are there. Now we have what can only be described as a mess where you have so many landmines, no one knows where they all are, and there's no easy way to move through these areas, and it's really holding the Ukrainians back now to be able to take their land back. There's a lot of push across the international community to use drones and to use other autonomous vehicles, whether they be ground vehicles or aerial vehicles, to help them fight. But these vehicles and these drones, they won't help clear the landmines for the military to be able to take the land back. Yeah, I mean, from kind of like when we did the clearance here, it was fine because you're doing it in a non-combative environment. But when I've had to go and deal with some of the areas that have needed clearing in the forest or close to Bakhmut or Soledar and places like that, it's a lot different because all you're trying to do is just clear a path, a single path through. So either you can walk through it or you can drive a vehicle through it, you know. And this is exactly what the ground on the front line looks like. Maybe not as concentrated as this, but this is why guys can't use detectors. This is, you know, and when I see people like constantly raising money for detectors on social media, it's like the Ukrainians need this for the front line, for the assaults. No, they don't use them. They won't use them. Like, I've got a metal detector in the car and you're more than welcome to have a go of just trying to move a meter with it. It's absolutely impossible. It's quite normal for if we use tank mines as an example, so it's quite normal for a tank mine to be booby-trapped, maybe with a military booby-trap device or a hand grenade. But what's happening now as time goes on, we're starting to see a lot more electronic systems come into place as well. We're seeing seismic sensors, magnetic sensors, light sensors, and it's making the job even harder. And the problem is these traps are booby traps or IEDs, are killing a lot of the combat engineers. And your combat engineers are like your medics. It takes a very long time to train them. And then on top of this, they need the ground experience and that work experience to really become efficient and very safe at their job. And in a space like Ukraine, we have such an evolving situation with booby traps and IEDs. It's really hard to stay on top of it because things change every week. Social media has helped a lot with this as well in one way, because with everyone having access to a smartphone and a camera now, we get a lot more information that is passed publicly. But that also creates another problem because there is a bit of a, I would normally describe it as kind of a monkey see, monkey do attitude, where if someone posts up a video of a specific booby trap either being laid or it's been found and it's being disarmed, someone else will see that and then they will copycat that. But they will copycat it slightly differently with their own twist on it. So every time we can have one mechanism published last week, and by the end of this week we'll have 10 or 20 different variations of this same problem. So social media is very, very good for us. Like, we have a lot of different combat engineer groups between myself and some of the other foreigners that work in country, and the Ukrainians, whether they be the military or the police. So there's a big push to share data. You know, ultimately we just want to help each other be able to do the job safely and effectively. In the long term, Ukraine will be able to get rid of the bulk of the explosive threats that they have in the ground right now. But for every day of fighting, it equates to probably a month's worth of clearance. You know, that's not an accurate figure, that's just a rough kind of understanding of it. A humanitarian deminer, when working by hand, which you would have to work by hand in an area like this, on average, that deminer is going to clear 10 square meters a day per person. So when you build into 175,000 square kilometers, it's a huge area. I don't believe that Ukraine will ever be completely mine or unexploded ordnance risk-free. There's always going to be places where something's been missed just because the place is so big. You're never going to be able to find every single mine. But I do think that we are going to be able to remove the bulk of the threats. But it's going to take generations to be able to do it. So I think it was like the third week that we were clearing here. We were just in this area, just kind of like going through, just picking up smaller bits. And there was a civilian straight that way, about 800 meters, pretty sure he triggered an OZM, bounding fragmentation mine. We heard the bang, we heard him scream, he screamed once and that was it. What do? You can't get to him, because we hadn't even started clearing this area yet. So when the invasion happened and I came back in, there was no real way for me to get back to Mariupol to go and support my old regiment. I knew that they would get surrounded. So I started helping a lot of foreign nationals to come into Ukraine, really. I set up a small team of myself and a couple of combat medics, some general volunteers, and then I had a number of combat engineers and a couple of EOD techs that started supporting me. So we made our way down into Kiev and started supporting different Ukrainian units with mine risk education, mine awareness, mine clearance. Every single soldier needs to understand this. It's the only way to keep both the soldiers and their vehicles safe. We then became involved with the National Police of Ukraine bomb disposal department. So we did a lot of major clearance with them around Kiev region. So we did a lot of clearance in Bucha, Hostomel, Irpin. We cleared this place alongside the police as well. And we're talking in the tens of tons of munitions that were removed from areas like this. But as 2022 rolled on, we started to get a lot more requests from different parts of the country to go and provide mine clearance training and mine clearance support for military units. I then did close to 5 months, I think, in the forest outside of Kremina. We were only supposed to be there for a couple of days, and we ended up there for nearly 5 months doing route clearance on the front line for medical evacuations to allow the ambulances to come into the forest. And then at the end of 2022, I was approached by some soldiers within Ukrainian military intelligence under GER and asked if I would come and sign a contract. And at the time, the guys who were working with me and girls had all gone home for Christmas, so I signed a contract with them. And then in January 2023, I met my now fiance working out of Kramatorsk. So I supported her, the organisation that she was working with. They were going into places like Bakhmut and Soledar to recover wounded Ukrainian soldiers and then transfer them back to either stab points or back to Kramatorsk or Sloviansk Hospital. And then, unfortunately, my work partner was killed in Bakhmut in a ATGM attack. And then we found out we were having a baby. So after almost 7 years on and off on the front line, I decided it was time to call it a day of being shot at and shelled every day, or most days. So I stepped away from frontline work, and we decided that we still wanted to keep supporting Ukraine, both from the medical side and the bomb disposal side. So then in August 2023, we set up Prevail to continue doing the work that we do. It's a very steep hill to climb at the moment. We were quite late in the game, effectively, coming in to create a humanitarian organisation. We had a lot of problems at the start because we need to crowdfund. You know, we have 2 ambulances to run. We have a fluctuating number of staff, anywhere between 4 people to 9 people, depending on who's rotating in and out of country at the time. We don't have any governmental support, either inside or outside of the country, and we are solely reliant on donations from Twitter and Instagram, really, like so many people that are here supporting Ukraine. We train upwards of 100 to 200 soldiers a month for mine risk education. We then, out of those 100 to 200 soldiers, 20 or 30 of them a month will be dedicated combat engineers. If anyone would like to support what we do in regards to landmine clearance and training, both for the Ukrainian military and for members of Ukrainian humanitarian demining section, or for the medical support that we offer, obviously donations are the lifeblood that we run on. We cannot run without the support of the kind care that people do give us with financial donations. We're also very grateful of anyone that can help to provide equipment, whether it be bomb disposal equipment, medical supplies. But I also understand that there's a lot of people that already have units that they support, organizations that they support. So all I would ask that if you can follow us on our social media, on our Instagram or on my Twitter, and take a look at our website, just by sharing the posts that we share to help us raise awareness. You know, for us as an organization, if the war stops tomorrow, we are still here. We will continue running our organization either till the point where we no longer can afford to do it, or the Ukrainian government is in a position where they can deal with the problem without the need from international support. As I say, our work here effectively will never be over. As an organisation, we want our organisation to be able to succeed. We want it to be able to grow, to be able to offer more and more support to the humanitarian mine sector. I think from a physical point of view, one day there'll be an end to my physical support on the ground, clearing mines. I think from a training point of view, that would continue further past that. From a mental point, I think a lot of people, Ukrainians, foreigners, and myself, we will always live with this war. In 10 years of supporting Ukraine, I've seen a lot of changes, but some things all still stay the same. Ever since 2014, the support that the Ukrainian military gets from the Ukrainian population is incredible, you know. You see it even now when we have things like the attacks on the Children's Cancer Hospital. You know, we went and responded to that in the afternoon after it happened. And there was literally thousands of people in the street there with supplies and water and shovels and spades ready to get stuck in and support and to help where they can. And you see that across the country. You know, we used to have civilians bring us food on the front line. I've lost count of the amount of families that have taken me into their homes to feed me or to help me dry my clothes off in the winter time. The strength and unity of the Ukrainian people is something that is really incredible to see. And now to see so much support around the world that's been given to the Ukrainian people, it's beautiful and it's heartbreaking, because you would think that with all the peace talks and everything that was supposed to happen back in 2015 and 2016 and so on, this conflict should have never turned into a war. It should never have happened in the first place. And it's hard, you know. I mean, I lost a few friends between 2014 to 2018, either on the front line or stupid things like car accidents and, you know, messing with things that they shouldn't have been messing with. But since 2022, that's just gone into overdrive now, and it's almost weekly where you get a message to say that a friend has been badly injured, or a friend has been killed, or a friend of a friend, you know. And I really feel for the Ukrainian people that this just has to continue. It almost feels that at times there is certain Western governments that are just drip feeding enough supplies to Ukraine just for them to be able to hold on, but without giving them the ability to be able to take their land back. And it just prolongs the suffering. It prolongs the suffering for the military, for the civilians, for the economy, for the wildlife, you know. What happened in Ukraine never should have happened, and the sooner we can have this situation resolved, the sooner Ukraine can start the process of healing, because it's going to take many generations for the pain that's being caused here to subside, and it will never go away. You know, the Ukrainian people will never forget what's happened to their country.